Fun story: the Whispering Church. I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. Not until that night at St. Andrew's Church. The church had been abandoned for years in the small town of Pineville. It was an old stone structure with overgrown ivy and rotting wooden doors. Curiosity got the better of me. I had heard stories about eerie sounds coming from the church at night. I decided to investigate despite my friends' warnings. The front doors creaked as I pushed them open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. Moonlight filtered through broken stained glass windows, casting eerie shadows on the floor. I walked down the long aisle toward the altar, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The sound of my heartbeat was the only thing that seemed real. Suddenly, I heard a whisper. It was so faint, I thought I imagined it. I stopped and strained to listen. The whisper grew louder and clearer, but was unintelligible. I turned around, but saw nothing. The whispering continued, coming from the shadows of the stained glass windows. My heart raced as I approached the altar. There, on the old wooden pulpit, was an old leather-bound book. It looked out of place in the decaying church. I picked up the book and opened it. The pages were filled with strange symbols and cryptic writing. As I flipped through the pages, the whispering became a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once. I could barely make out the words, but they seemed to be pleading. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around to find nothing but darkness. The whispering stopped. I dropped the book and ran for the door. As I reached the entrance, I glanced back one last time. The altar was illuminated by a ghostly light. Shadows danced on the walls, and I saw fleeting shapes moving in the darkness. The church was alive with a malevolent presence. I fled into the night, my heart pounding with terror. To this day, I don't know what I saw or heard that night. But whenever I pass by St. Andrew's Church, I can't shake the feeling that something is waiting inside, whispering to anyone brave enough to enter. 2 stories, The Church of Shadows. I'd always been drawn to abandoned places, but the old church on the edge of Coldwater was different. I'd heard the stories. The locals spoke of it in hushed tones, warning of spirits that roamed its broken pews. My curiosity got the better of me one autumn evening. The sun had barely set when I arrived. The church's silhouette loomed against the darkening sky, its steeple like a finger pointing to the heavens. I pushed open the heavy doors, their rusty hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the musty scent of decay. Moonlight filtered through shattered stained glass windows, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I moved cautiously down the aisle, my flashlight flickering in the dim light. The wooden pews were overturned, and the altar was draped in cobwebs. My footsteps echoed through the vast emptiness, each sound amplified in the silence. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the church, extinguishing my flashlight. I fumbled in the dark, my heartbeat quickening. Just then, I heard a whisper, faint but unmistakable, coming from the direction of the altar. "Leave now." I turned on my phone's flashlight, casting a weak beam across the room. The whisper came again, this time louder and more urgent. I could see shadows moving, shapes shifting where there should be none. Panic set in as I realized the shadows were taking form, human forms, but twisted and distorted. I sprinted towards the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. I pounded on the heavy wood, my knuckles raw, but the door wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, forming a chant that sent chills down my spine. Desperate, I turned to face the altar. A figure stood there, cloaked in darkness, its face obscured. It raised a hand, and a flicker of light revealed a twisted grin. "You should not have come here," it said. I turned and ran, my only thought to escape this nightmare. The shadows seemed to close in, their whispers becoming a cacophony of dread. I reached the door again, and with a final frantic push, it gave way. I burst into the night, gasping for air. Looking back, I saw the church's silhouette, now quiet and still. I never went back, but sometimes on quiet nights I hear whispers in the wind, a reminder of the shadows that dwell in the Church of Shadows. 3 stories, The Forgotten Church. I used to think that old buildings had their own way of whispering secrets, but I never imagined I'd be caught in one of those stories. It started with a small town called Morningside, a place where nothing much ever happened until the day I decided to explore the abandoned church on the edge of town. The church was a relic of a bygone era, its spire piercing the sky like a skeletal finger. I could barely make out the faded name on the rotting sign, St. Michael's. As I pushed open the creaky door, an eerie silence greeted me, broken only by the scuffling of rats in the darkness. Inside, the church was a cavernous space with rows of rotting pews and a dust-covered altar. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, their meanings lost to time. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. I could almost feel eyes on me, watching from the shadows. As I wandered deeper into the church, a chill ran down my spine. The feeling of being followed grew stronger, and I heard whispers drifting through the air. "Leave," they seemed to say. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned around and saw nothing but empty space. I approached the altar, where an old book lay open on a pedestal. The pages were yellowed, the ink barely visible. I squinted to make out the words, "The Forgotten Ones." My curiosity got the better of me, and I started reading. The text spoke of an ancient ritual and a pact made with something dark and vengeful. Suddenly, the air grew colder, and I heard footsteps echoing through the church. I spun around to see a figure emerging from the shadows. Its eyes glowed an unnatural red, and its mouth twisted into a sinister grin. I ran for the door, but it slammed shut with a deafening thud. Panic set in as the figure drew closer. "You should have left," it hissed. I could feel its icy breath on my neck. My mind raced as I tried to find an escape. In a final desperate attempt, I grabbed the book and threw it at the figure. The moment it touched the ground, the figure let out a blood-curdling scream and vanished. The door creaked open, and I bolted outside, never looking back. I never returned to Morningside. The church remains abandoned, its secrets buried with the souls who once worshipped there. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the whispers urging me to leave.